Um, the other software that you were talking about, the Dauntless,
Uh-huh.
can you spell that? Because I went to go look for it and I couldn't, I don't know what I was doing, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's Dauntles.
Okay, that's what I had, but I'll try again.
Do you have um, an Apple phone or is it an Android?
I have an Apple.
Let me see really quick if I can share the Apple Store link. Mm-hmm.
And then I do have one more question.
Yeah.
The book that you suggested, the AFD.
Uh,
So is that
okay, go ahead with your question.
well, now I'm wondering if that's something you suggested we get. But when I went to look on Amazon, it's all in different regions.
Yeah. So the AFD you don't need to buy because
Okay.
it updates so frequently, and I'll show you the software that you can use
Okay.
that is um, it has all the AFD and it's always up to date too. So you don't have to like buy these because material in aviation, like maps and so all your charts and the AFD, those are all they expire like every 3 months, and you have to get the new ones. So let me show you that really quick. So I just posted the link, the web link, so you can see what the icon and everything looks like in the chat. Um, let's see. Got to get into present mode here. There it goes. So this is a software we're going to be using for our flight planning. It's called SkyVector, so anybody can use this. It's a free online software. You don't have to create a sign-in. You can if you want to. What's nice about creating the sign-in is that you can save your flight plans that you create. But this is all real-time, real-world maps that are always updated, up to date. But this is what we're going to be using. So yeah, you can just go onto this website, and if you want to see the material that's in the AFD, you can like this is Salt Lake City International Airport right here, this green dot. You can click on it and then click on this little blue link there, and it'll pull you into all the information on Salt Lake City International. And then you click on that, and there's your AFD material. This is a page right out of the AFD book. So There's all your information about the runways, about the airport, the ILSs, so on and so forth. It gives you all the frequencies and everything. So I wouldn't recommend buying the AFD, but you know. There you go. So we're going to teach you guys how to use this when we get into the navigation portion of the class. This is what we'll be using for all of our flight planning. This is what you'll use when you're taking your practical exam. It's a really powerful software. In fact, this software, if you subscribe to it, like you can get a full subscription to it. And what will happen is you can get like fuel prices, you can get, or you can create your flight plan on here and then actually send it into ATC and, you know, get a strip created. You can use real world data like your speed, the altitude you're going to fly at, how many pounds of fuel you burn. And then once you've populated all that information, it uses the actual like winds aloft and temperatures and everything to create a flight plan for you. And then, like I said, you click send or file, and it'll send it over to ATC, and then you can actually go and fly that flight plan in real world. So it's really, really cool stuff. But we're just going to use, like, we'll do stuff like this. KSFO to KLAX. Oops. And then you can like drag and drop your route, create different routes. Stuff like that. Anyways, later day we'll get playing with that, but you guys are welcome to open it up and start getting familiar with it. You're welcome to do that anytime you'd like. We've even got some videos on it. I believe in the flight planning folder, or you can go onto YouTube and like watch a video on how to use SkyVector, and it'll show you, give you some tips and tricks on using it. So anyways, that's still a little ways off, but have at it. All right. Anybody have any questions about anything we covered last night? So this is where a lot of the stuff we're going to cover today is going to be pretty important stuff. This is kind of where the meat and potatoes of what we do as dispatches in subpart T and U of 121. So that being said, you know, I will do my best to make sure that I'm making you aware of the stuff that you need to memorize, like I did last night. But once again, just to reiterate that these red boxes indicate that it's pretty important information. You need to pay a little closer attention to it. So if there's no questions about the FARs that we've gone over so far, then we'll get started on subpart T here. So responsibility of operational control. So this one is one that you will be tested on. This is one that you need to memorize. And you know, you'll probably see it on your practical, your oral, your in interviews, stuff like that. So really important one, and it's because this is specifically talking about the responsibilities of an aircraft dispatcher. So the responsibility, so each certificate holder conducting domestic operations is responsible for operational control. The pilot in command, so first it talks about the pilot in command and the aircraft are jointly responsible for. So this is one that you need to memorize right here. The pilot in command and aircraft dispatcher are jointly being the key word here, responsible for the pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release. Okay, that's what you need to memorize. The way I have this, so I use acronyms just like everything else in aviation. Acronyms are how we live. So I use PPDD, double P, double D. Pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release. Okay.
So when it comes to testing, do we need to be able to write this down verbatim, or is it going to be multiple choice?
So in our test, it'll be it'll be multiple choice. But when it comes to like to your practical, like the oral part of your practical test, and in interviews, they'll even ask this question. So what are the three things that the pilot and dispatcher are jointly responsible for? And you would say the pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release. Like that's how you would answer it. So this part is what you need to know verbatim.
Roger that.
So the next question that they usually ask is, what are the three responsibilities, like sole responsibilities of an aircraft dispatcher? And this one, I would have all of that verbatim right there. Okay. So the way I memorize this one is mic, like you're clicking the mic, you know. So monitor, issue, and cancel. So monitor the progress of each flight, issuing necessary information for the safety of the flight, and canceling or redispatching a flight if, in the opinion or the opinion of the pilot in command, the flight can operate or continue to operate safely as planned or released. So this is one of the ones that I would definitely have verbatim. And I'll tell you why. And I go over this with every class. Like, is it acceptable to just kind of go monitor each flight, issue information for the safety, and cancel or redispatch? Sure. I mean, you'd probably score 100% on getting this answer right. But when you walk into an interview and you give kind of a, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it, a half-assed response, you know, they're going to kind of expect that that's what you're going to be. So to sound like an aviation professional, having that part, because of how essential it is to our duties as a dispatcher, having that verbatim and being able to to quote this verbatim, it shows that you are very, very aware of the responsibilities, kind of the mantle you're taking on yourself as an aircraft dispatcher. Because this is 100% in this one FAR right here, this just covered your responsibility 100% as a dispatcher. Like, this is the dispatch FAR. So that's why I emphasize this one being verbatim. So now here, just responding pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release. 100% acceptable. I mean, you can say dispatch release of a flight in compliance with this chapter, but really this part, right here is more talking about the FAR that you're reading right now. So just saying pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release of a flight, 100% acceptable. We're just saying dispatch release, 100% acceptable. But these three, it is 100%, 100% very important to be able to quote verbatim. So, does everybody have it?
And it's basically what the flashcards are following right along with what you're.
Yeah.
Combination of both. It shouldn't be a problem to learn verbatim.
Yeah. And, there's some memorization techniques. You just kind of find the one that works for you. Those flashcards are great. One thing that I used to do is I would just write the first letter of each word. And that way I could go through it until I had it down. Whatever works for you, then roll with it. But at least be able to extract the key. Like, what is it trying to say? It's trying to say monitor the progress of each flight, issue necessary information for the safety of the flight, and cancel or redispatch a flight. You'll probably be mostly okay at that point, but having the rest of this right here is just going to you're going to be a cut above the rest of the applicants at that point. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So now the other parts are just follow-ups for the dispatch. It's talking about each pilot in command of the aircraft during flight time in command of the aircraft and crew is responsible for the safety of the passengers, crew members, cargo in the airplane. So this is what we were talking about the other day when I said, at the end, like, the pilot has final authority, but we try to make these we try to make sure that he's making the best possible choice with the information that you supply him. So each pilot in command has full control and authority in the operation of the aircraft without limitation over the crew members and their duties during flight time, whether or not he holds valid certificates authorizing him to perform duties of those crew members. So now, this is kind of worded a little confusing, but what it's saying is, whether or not the pilot has a flight attendant certificate, which is an actual like FAA certificate, or a flight navigator certificate, regardless of what certificates he actually holds, if he is the pilot in command, then he has full authority over all positions on board the aircraft. He is the final authority. And that's when it's during flight time, okay? So I'm just going to emphasize this one more time. Paragraph B, and then 1, 2, 3 of paragraph C are the ones that I would have memorized. So this is talking about flag operations, and it's essentially the same information. Okay, so pre-flight planning, delayed dispatch release. Aircraft dispatcher is solely responsible for monitoring the progress of each flight, issuing necessary instructions for the safety of the flight, and canceling or redispatching a flight. The only thing that kind of changes really is right there. It adds instructions and information. And then right here, paragraph F. No pilot may operate an aircraft in careless or reckless manner so as to endanger life or property. Believe it or not, it's bad if you like intentionally destroy an airplane. Yeah, during your oral exam, I don't know, just getting back to Thomas's question. Yeah, the oral exam is kind of like an interview, right? So I would treat it the same. So each certificate holder conducting supplemental operations. So what are supplemental operations? Well, those are like your charter flights, cargo flights, stuff like that. So each certificate holder conducting supplemental operations is responsible for operational control and shall list each person authorized by it to exercise operational control. So things kind of change a little bit when it comes to supplemental operations. So we do like test flights and stuff. And we will create what we call just a flight plan for the pilot. But there's no dispatch release created. They just kind of do their thing, whatever they have to do to accomplish what, you know, the mission is kind of what they do. But with supplemental operations, you're not typically I want to say supplement. So 135, I believe, is your charter flight. Yeah. So 135 is your charter. Supplemental would be like your test flights, your ferry flights, stuff like that. So you don't typically have passengers on board the aircraft for the most part. So anyways, it's not regularly scheduled, and it's to get an airplane or something from point A to point B. So pilot in command is basically full authority at that point. So we can offer information, but we do not hold the operational control of the flight on a supplemental. Typically, the pilots are the ones that are just calling the shots 100%. So not a whole lot of this, and you'll find the particulars when you get to your airline with supplemental operations. Each supplemental flight is handled very different from the next even. So yeah. Emergencies, domestic and flag operations. In an emergency situation that requires immediate decision and action, the pilot in command may take any action that he considers necessary under the circumstances. So, like solely in this incident, you know, solely the pilot that landed his aircraft in the Hudson. So didn't matter what ATC said, what anybody else said. He did what he found was absolutely necessary to ensure, the best possible outcome with the information he had. He didn't have time to wait for other options or anything like that. He had to make command decision. So in such case, he may deviate from prescribed operations, procedures, and methods, weather minimums, and this chapter to the extent required in the interests of safety. So this is exactly what he did, right? Had dual bird strike, lost both engines, and had total engine failure, had to put the airplane down, and that was the safest place to put it down, right? An emergency situation arising during flight that requires immediate decision and action by an aircraft dispatcher, and that is known to him, the aircraft dispatcher shall advise the pilot in command of the emergency, shall ascertain the decision of the pilot in command, and shall have the decision recorded. If the aircraft dispatcher cannot communicate with the pilot, he shall declare an emergency and take action he considers necessary under the circumstances. So on the test, you'll see a question that basically says, is a dispatcher allowed to declare an emergency? And the answer would be yes or true. Okay. So write that down if you're interested in test questions. Whenever a pilot in command or dispatcher exercises emergency authority, he or she shall keep the appropriate ATC facility and dispatch centers fully informed of the progress of the flight. The decision or person declaring the emergency shall send a written report of any deviation through the certificate holder's operations manager to the administrator. A dispatcher shall send his report within 10 days after the date of the emergency, and the pilot in command shall send his report within 10 days after returning to his home base. Okay, so whenever an emergency is declared, like if you as a dispatcher declared an emergency, you have to write a report within 10 days. And it's really easy. Management walks you through it. In most cases, most airlines, management will walk you through it one by one and help you write the letter that you have to submit. But
I experienced a bird strike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about 4 ducks.
Oh, geez.
At 207, about 50 feet off Catchmack Bay.
Oh gosh. So were you were in a float plane then? Yeah.
No, we were taking off from Homer, but it was just an after-work fun ride with the chief pilot.
Oh man, that wasn't so fun, I'm guessing.
Well, at the moment it happened, no, but once we realized the plane was going to stay in the air, we were pretty happy.
Oh yeah. So it wasn't engine failure?
No, they missed. They hit everything else, but nothing went through the cowl.
That's good.
Everything clipped the wings and the body, basically.
Yeah. We had, I was dispatching an airplane that had a bird strike, but luckily, like in your case, it missed the engine. So, but they landed. They didn't even know they had hit a bird. And when they landed, they got outside the aircraft and they looked. There were blood streaks down the side of the aircraft, and they said there was a big old dent in the side of the aircraft as well. So they had to basically we swapped the airplane out and sent them on their way, but yeah, had to get it fixed. I've had emergency.
It was a bird strike.
What's that?
is a bird strike considered like an incursion, where it talks about like every airport every day has like 3 incursions or something like that?
No, that's talking typically more about runway incursion. So, like you're on final approach about touchdown, and somebody breaks the barrier, like basically taxis onto the runway while you're on final approach. So you have to go missed.
Would that be considering like if they didn't do a hold?
Yeah. So yeah, anytime there's it's typically like an aircraft's on final approach and somebody crosses the runway or lines up, or that's a runway incursion.
Okay.
And that's typically on takeoff or landing, so that it happens in both situations. So those are really, really bad. There was a
because they said that often, like that's one of the biggest issues they have.
Yeah. In what was it, Till something or other airport, Telluride, or no? There's, I can't. It was back in like the 80s. There was a 747-400 that was taking off, and there was another bigger aircraft. I can't remember what it was that crossed right in front of them. They didn't clear them, and both airplanes were completely disintegrated. Killed like 300 people. So they're ultra dangerous. So yeah, birds, like emergencies are no joke, and we're also going to go through a couple accidents, like NTSB investigations, because in aviation, yesterday I asked you guys at one point, I was like, seems like it's pretty common sense. And it's kind of funny how, when we were talking about performance limitations, some of this stuff seems like it's ultra common sense. But the reason why there's an FAR specifically calling that out means that there was either an accident or somebody died, doing that. And so they had to write a rule saying, don't do that. That's not smart, right? And aviation is very much, it's still young. It's still in its infancy, really.
Well,
we've
I also noticed that that happens with like complacency, like people that are too comfortable or get arrogant.
Yeah, and automation, plays a part in it as well. But yeah, aviation is just completely riddled with stories of somebody doing something just like, what were you thinking, kind of a thing, and ends up buying the family farm, and it's just it's hard knowing that all of these rules and exemptions not exemptions, rules and things are due to aircraft accidents. So doing NTSB investigations is kind of essential to us learning from our past. We're always trying to learn how to do things better and how to become better dispatchers or better pilots, right? So, um, and to that point, the ASAP, the ASAP reporting system that they have now is actually designed for that very reason. So the ASAP program, can't remember what it actually stands for, what the acronym stands for, but what the ASAP program is back in not too long ago, within the last even 10, 15 years, anytime you made a mistake and the FAA found out about it, it was very like iron fist ruling how they handled a lot of stuff. If there were certain violations, it was like a one strike, you're out kind of a thing. Even if it didn't result in any accidents or any problems, really, and you caught it, it still was serious enough that, like, as a dispatcher, you could get your license pulled right there in front of you. And for a very long time, pilots and dispatchers and mechanics and everybody that is on the operations side actually working the jobs, and then the administration side, the FAA side, it's always been a very like we've always butted heads, right? Because they're kind of like the managers and we're the employees doing all the work, and they don't know what it takes, and they ruled with an iron fist is how it felt. So pilots and FAA representatives or dispatchers and FAA representatives, there's always this tension all the time. Like, oh crap, an FAA rep is here, so we got to like fly straight. We can't make any mistakes. That is going away. They're changing that culture, and the ASAP program is one of the key things that is helping change that culture. So what the ASAP program does is it's like, if you break an FAR, if you do something wrong, then you can basically turn yourself into the FAA saying, hey, I messed up on this. This is the lesson I learned. This is what I need to do to fix it. And you submit it, and then they'll send you a letter back, saying how they processed it. And really the only way you can get your license pulled now is if you are under the influence of drugs or alcohol on duty. That's like the quickest way to lose your license. Or B, if you do something intentionally, like you intentionally endangered the life of all of the passengers on board an aircraft by not reporting, something essential to the safety of the flight. Like you intentionally and maliciously did that, then yeah, and they find out about it, they'll pull your license right there, right? You're not fit for duty. So that's pretty much the only way you can lose your license now. So as long as you're reporting yourself and you're, learning and taking it as a lessons learned each time that you have made a mistake, they go, okay, that's great. They may like notify the airline you're working for and say, hey, he or she may need a little more training in this subject category. Can you go over that with them? But really at the end of the day, they're going to process it and you're gonna be good. So but that's something, even in my aviation career, I started flying when I was 16 years old, and even back then, that was only 13 years ago. No, more than that. Anyways, 18 years ago. Yeah, it was a very much like, oh, don't talk to them. They're FAA. So that culture's largely changed in aviation. So emergencies with supplemental operations, virtually word for word for what we just went over. Very, not a whole lot that you need to know. Except as provided by paragraph B of this section for engine inoperative landing reporting. Whenever an airplane engine fails or whenever an engine is shut down to prevent possible damage, the PIC must land the plane at the nearest suitable airport in point of time at which a safe landing can be made. So let's kind of talk about this one for 1 minute. We're going to jump back into SkyVector here. Okay. Let's do this. Well, okay. We're going to fly from San Francisco to Denver. Okay. We're flying to Denver and we get over, well, shoot, let's just say St. George, right? So St. George is, actually we get over Las Vegas, okay? So Las Vegas, we're overflying Las Vegas and we have an engine failure. Does that mean that Las Vegas is the nearest suitable airport? We're at 35,000 feet and we have an engine failure. Is that the nearest suitable airport? It could be, right? I mean, it's a pretty big airport, pretty safe that we'd be able to land there. But does that mean that we should like circle them down and make them land right there at Las Vegas if they're already overflying it? No, I would argue that it would be safer to have them continue on to like St. George Regional, right? If it's a SkyWest flight, I'd have them continue over to St. George. And the reason why is because they've got to descend from 35,000 feet to that altitude. So, having them hang out and just do holding patterns and circle down to an approach altitude for Las Vegas is probably not going to be the safest. ATC is going to make sure that they can get in, but it would probably be safer just to send them up over here to St. George because, we'd be able to handle the aircraft and we'd be able to make sure that they can get in safely at a safe descent speed, right? So that's one thing that we want to be thinking about when we've got planes in the air. If there was an emergency, where am I going to put this guy down? Now, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to send him to like Colorado City Municipal because that airport is a lot smaller and has, it's for multiple reasons it wouldn't be a good choice because they probably don't have Jet A, they probably don't have Sky and Airbridge, they probably don't have the stairs for the aircraft or the people to handle the aircraft, right? But so that wouldn't really be a safe, suitable alternate. But St. George, it has all the accommodations we need to take in that type of aircraft. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So on the test, you're probably gonna see a question that says something like, "What are some of the things that constitute a suitable alternate?" And you know, I would say things like, they've got the fuel to fuel up the aircraft when you land. They've got support people to handle the aircraft, right? That's kind of important because if you don't have anybody to come and open the door and help you get out of the airplane, then your passengers are going to be sitting there for a while getting pissed off. It's got a suitable runway. It's got it's legal. Like the weather is legal at that airport. Just use kind of a common sense approach to the question, and think about what am I going to need at that airport for the airplane to land. So a suitable runway, fuel, things like that to take care of the airplane, and then things to accommodate the passengers or help us get the airplane back in the air. So is that clear as mud?
Yep.
All right. So if not more than one engine on an airplane that has 3 or more engines, it's the same thing, just changes the number of engines, nature of the malfunction, possible mechanical difficulties that may occur if flight is continued, the altitude, weight, and usable fuel time of the engine is shut down. So these are all reasons to or that create a suitable alternate. So air traffic congestion, kind of terrain, familiarity with the airport to be used. Pilot has to announce or report each engine shutdown. So all of that. So dispatching authority. Okay, we're into subpart U. Okay, this is known as the dispatch. FAR's part 65, subpart U. This is this has all the rules and regulations pertaining to dispatch releases and dispatchers. Okay. I'm sorry. Part 121, subpart U, not part 65. Part 121, subpart U. Anyways, so dispatching authority for domestic operations, except when an airplane lands at an intermediate airport specified on the original dispatch release and remains there for not more than 1 hour, no person may start a flight unless the aircraft dispatcher specifically authorizes that flight. So this isn't something we typically run into, mostly because at a lot of your regional airlines, you're not going to have what we call intermediate stops. Okay. Intermediate stops are so you can plan a flight plan that basically, let's say that you're flying Seattle to Phoenix with a stop in Salt Lake City. So your primary destination would be Phoenix. Your primary departure airport would be Seattle. Your intermediate stop would be Salt Lake City. Okay, you're going to let off like 2 or 3 passengers, and then you're going to continue the flight over to Phoenix. 99.99% of your regional airlines that are regularly scheduled operations, they do not do intermediate stops, because what they'll do is, let's say that you have to divert to a smaller airport, they'll just create it as a new flight plan because it's a lot cleaner a way of doing things. So, so yeah, intermediate stops have just kind of their own rule. So if they're on the ground for more than an hour at an intermediate stop, it requires that the dispatcher creates a new flight plan for that flight. That's essentially what it's saying. So dispatching authority for flag operations, no person may start a flight unless the aircraft dispatcher specifically authorizes that flight, and no person may continue a flight from an intermediate airport without redispatch if the airplane has been on the ground for more than 6 hours. So it just changes. Domestic is 1 hour, flag operations it's 6 hours. It was the only change. And then with supplemental flights, no person may. Oh, go ahead.
I assume this is going to cover fuel stops as well. When I worked for Allegiant,
Yeah, so fuel stop, we don't. Yeah, so a fuel stop would be an intermediate stop.
Okay.
And like SkyWest, I know that is something we don't do fuel stops. If we have to stop for fuel, it requires a new dispatch release. We would say, okay, the aircraft's diverting. We'd have them divert to an intermediate airport, and then once they landed, we would create a new dispatch release for them to fly out of that airport. So,
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. When
I
I was at
know.
Allegiant, we'd occasionally have those flights out of Vegas or Phoenix.
Mhm.
Would use Louisville as a stop point for fuel.
Yeah.
If they were heading further east.
Yeah, Allegiant is kind of a weird. They're not a very standard method 121 carrier. They kind of shoot from the hip. And that's also another reason why they are so cheap, right? Is because they don't. I don't know how to explain it. They don't fly conventionally. They fly kind of outside the box. So most passengers aren't okay with like saying, "Oh yeah, we're good with wasting another 40 minutes to stop in Louisville and fuel up," you know. But if you're willing to pay, or if you're not willing to pay the extra money to fly direct, Allegiant's not a bad way to go. And they do fly direct to most cities, but they do have kind of weird things like fuel stops and stuff like that.
It was only really a problem whenever the plane would be weight restricted.
Yeah.
Coming out of those hot airports.
Yeah. And there was one situation where, man, I can't even remember how this situation happened at SkyWest. I was dispatching and I think I know what happened. And it was a weight restricted issue. But it wasn't a planned weight restricted issue. So the dispatch release was created. Everything was good. But at the last minute, there was a flight that canceled into a city. And so they they filled up the plane, right? And so rather than the weight and balance coming out the weight or the payload being the same as what I had originally planned it as, it came out different. And so we took off, I think we took off some contingency fuel, or anyways, what happened was he ended up, and the winds and this was a pass down flight too, so I can't remember all the caveats, but it was a perfect storm of bad situations. This guy was flying from like Dallas Fort Worth to Seattle or something like that, and we had to have him stop in Salt Lake to get fuel because he wasn't going to make it all the way to Seattle. So, but at that point, we just diverted him. We just said, this is a diversion. So in a diversion, the reason why the diversion is so different than an intermediate stop is because the planned destination was always Seattle until we decided to divert. And then your planned destination switches from Seattle to like Salt Lake in this case. And so that becomes your primary destination when you choose to divert. So, so it required a brand new dispatch release. Here, I got a student calling me down in St. George. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I've got a student from Nigeria that was over here taking a test, and he had to call me with the results. So, which he passed. Great. Perfect. So, anyways, sorry about that. So, getting back to it, so when we have to divert, that becomes our primary destination, and we redispatch as it rather than DFW to Seattle, which was our original release. We go from Salt Lake City to Seattle, and it's a brand new release, as if it was a brand new flight. So we handle it a little bit differently than you would at some places, but yeah. So familiarity with weather conditions. Domestic and flag operations, no aircraft dispatcher may release a flight unless he is thoroughly familiar with reported and forecast weather conditions on the route to be flown. Okay. So this is part of what I was talking about yesterday, about showing up a little early for your shift in order to become very familiar with the weather patterns over the U.S. or whatever your route of flight typically is. I know with some airlines, you're flying your desk, you're doing transatlantic or transpacific flights all day. So regardless of what it is, being thoroughly familiar with your weather conditions is key to dispatching successfully. I know in that video, did everybody get to watch the video of Life as a Dispatcher? And it's like all the Delta people talking about, or I'm sorry, United. And the lady's like, yeah, it's good when, your pilot calls you up after a flight and says there wasn't any turbulence along your flight or his flight. And, kind of makes you feel good because you planned that flight successfully. That's what we're doing. That's at least what we're trying to do. We don't want to put them into bad situations where they have to make, difficult choices of how they're going to get out of a situation. Like, we don't want to send them right down the middle of a thunderstorm alley if we can avoid it. We want to give them the best opportunity, the most information we can give them. So, pretty key to our job, right? Aircraft dispatcher information to pilot in command. The aircraft dispatcher shall provide the pilot in command all available current reports or information on airport conditions and irregularities of navigation facilities that may affect the safety of the flight. Okay. On our release, we have to have the most current weather when we send that release. This requires us to pull, make sure that we're keeping our updated weather throughout the day. When we get to meteorology, we'll talk about how METARs are issued every hour, and TAFs, or terminal area forecasts, are issued they're regularly scheduled issue times are 4 times a day or every 6 hours, right? So these weather reports have to be current when we send this to them. When it talks about information on airport conditions and irregularities of navigation facilities, we pull this information from NOTAMs, or Notice to Airmen. And this is information that it comes all jumbled and it's hard to decipher at first, but you guys will learn how to decipher the information in them. But it'll tell us, we've got obstructions or obstacles that you got to clear. We've got navigation facilities out, things like that. So making sure our pilots have all that information is key to them receiving all the necessary information for the safety of the flight. Okay. Before beginning a flight, the aircraft dispatcher shall provide the pilot in command with all available weather reports and forecasts of weather phenomena that may affect the safety of the flight, including adverse weather phenomena such as clear air turbulence, thunderstorms, and low altitude wind shear for each route to be flown and each airport to be used. So this is also something that we attach to the release. If we're expecting, I know at SkyWest we had automated turbulence reports, which when they first came out, they were a total pain in the butt because they were usually not very accurate at all. They'd say heavy turbulence over a certain area, and the pilots would be like, "Oh, they're expecting heavy turbulence," And we'd be like, "Well, there's no PIREPs saying that there is turbulence in that area, and we've had planes going through it all day, so you should be good." And they'd fly through it, and they'd be like, "There wasn't even a bump," So, but anyways, a lot of that information is disseminated through an automated system, but we also, as part of being thoroughly familiar with the weather along the route, if we see something that kind of pops out to us, we need to make sure that we're sending that information to the pilot. Okay. And this, yes, before beginning of the flight, but it is something that we're watching the entire route of the flight as well. Like if I see a severe turbulence PIREP pop up directly in the flight path of one of my airplanes, you bet I'm going to let them know about it. I'm going to give them the heads up, send them an ACARS message saying, "Hey, look out, you got severe turbulence at this altitude. I recommend you either descend or kind of fly out around this area to avoid that." So. During a flight, the aircraft dispatcher, oh, we already went through this, sorry. Anyways, any questions on that one?
No.
So facilities and services for supplemental operations. Before beginning a flight, each pilot in command shall obtain all available current weather or current reports or information on airport conditions or irregularities of navigation facilities that may affect the safety of the flight. Just redundancy, right? During a flight, they need to figure it out. Since they're supplemental, it's the PIC that's got to figure this stuff out. Okay. Airplane equipment. No person may dispatch or release an airplane unless it's airworthy and equipped prescribed in 121.303. So you've got to have an airworthy aircraft, believe it or not. Like I said before, that's completely obvious and like a no-brainer, but somebody flew without an airworthy aircraft and it cost people lives, and so they wrote an FAR about it. So communication navigation facilities, except as provided in paragraph B of this section for certificate holder conducting flag operations, no person may dispatch an airplane over an approved route or route segment unless the communication and navigations facilities required by 121.99 and 121.103 for the approval of that route or segment are in satisfactory operating condition. Okay. This one's pretty important for the fact that when we're doing our flight planning, some of our navigational facilities that are along our route may be broken down, may not be working. So we need to make sure that the pilot knows that, and also if possible, if it is something that they are going to rely upon when they're navigating, we're going to try to change that if it's not working, right? So a perfect example of that is going to be, let's say that we have a flight that's coming in to land at San Francisco Airport and the Oakland VOR is out of service. We're going to make sure that the pilot knows about that because he may need to use that VOR for reference points on his instrument approach procedure while he's flying into San Francisco. So just making sure navigation facilities is kind of the key. Navigation facilities are working is kind of the gist of this FAR. And there you go again, just another redundancy for supplemental operations. So dispatch or flight release under VFR. We don't fly VFR, but you can't dispatch a VFR flight unless the ceiling of visibility en route, as indicated by available weather reports or forecasts or any combination thereof, are and will remain at or above applicable VFR minimums until the aircraft arrives at the airport specified on the release. And this is ETOPS. When it says over the top, we're talking about ETOPS. Can't dispatch over the top unless appropriate weather reports or forecasts or any combination thereof indicate weather conditions will be at or above authorized minimums at the ETA of the airport in which you're dispatched to. Let me jump over that one. All right. This is a very important one. I want you guys to write down some information here. So if the weather conditions at the airport of takeoff are below landing minimums, you have to have an alternate airport listed on the release. A takeoff alternate is what we call it, okay? Super important. Okay, and this is one that you will see on tests and in practicals and interviews, whatever. Right? 1/12 of a mile, something like that, 1/11th of a mile. Anyways, let's say that you have very, very, very poor visibility. If you take off from that airport and were to have, let's say, a bird strike or, engine failure or something, and you needed to get back to that airport you just took off from and land, if the visibility is that low, it's not legal to land at that airport. So you can take off just fine. Taking off isn't a problem because all the pilot's got to see really at the end of the day is the center line for long enough that he can, stay on it, make sure that he's on the pavement, and then get off the ground, right? But landing's kind of a different story. So if you are below landing minimums at takeoff, you have to have a departure alternate listed on your dispatch release. So the question is going to be worded, when are you required to list a departure or a takeoff alternate? And the response is when the departure airport is below landing minimums. Everybody understand that one? Have it written down.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So here's the requirement that our alternate airport must meet. And this one is also a very, very, very important one. So when when do you have to have an alternate listed on the release? We went over this yesterday.
Always.
Always. Okay. So, no person may dispatch an airplane under IFR, ignore the over the top, unless he lists at least one alternate airport for each destination airport in the release. Okay. So, when you are asked this question, when are you required to list an alternate on the dispatch release? Always, but there's an exception. When the weather conditions forecast for the destination and the first alternate airport are marginal for at least 1 hour, whatever. Okay, so here's the exception. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. However, no alternate airport is required if for at least 1 hour before and 1 hour after the estimated time of arrival at the destination airport, the appropriate weather for reports or forecast or any combination of them indicate that the ceiling will be at least 2,000 feet above the airport elevation and the visibility will be at least 3 miles. Okay, so we call this the 1, 2, 3 rule. So write this down. So the question will be, when are we required to list an alternate on the release? Your response would be always, unless, and then you'll apply the 1, 2, 3 rule. The 1, 2, 3 is your acronym. So 1 hour before or 1 hour after the ETA, you have at least 2,000 feet ceilings and 3 miles of visibility. Okay. So always, unless 1 hour before the ETA, you have at least 2,000 foot ceilings and 3 miles of visibility. 1, 2, 3. Does everybody understand it? Get it?
Yep.
Okay. So let's take a quick look at that. Oops. So what it's talking about here is we're looking at a TAF, okay? This is what we call a TAF, this section right here. Okay. So let's say that we're landing at 0800 Zulu. We'll talk about what Zulu means. Goodness sakes. So at 0800 Zulu, that falls in this TAF line. Okay, this is a forecast. So it's saying from the 9th at 0700 Zulu, winds are going to be from the east at 10 knot or at 9 knots. You're going to have 5 statute miles of visibility, and you're going to have scattered clouds at 3,000 feet. Okay. So at 0800, 1 hour before would be 0700, 1 hour after would be 09. So it's all falling into this forecast line right here. Oh, doesn't like being zoomed in that far. Okay. So do we have the applicable, like, would we be required to list an alternate? So ceilings are considered, like, what constitutes a ceiling? We talked about this one yesterday. It's from the definitions. Like, what is the definition of a ceiling?
Means the height above the Earth's surface at the lowest layer of clouds.
Okay. So, yes, you nailed it, except for it has to be broken, overcast, or vertical visibility, right? So, scattered, when it says SCT, it's saying scattered cloud layer. Okay, so this wouldn't be considered a ceiling. Okay, scattered. If it's broken, it'll be BKN, and if it's overcast, it's OVC. So we're scattered 3,000 feet, so we don't have a ceiling, and it's also at 3,000 feet, so it's above our 2,000 foot mark. So even if this said broken right here, we'd still be good as far as ceiling goes. And at least 3 miles of visibility. Well, we have 5 miles of visibility, so we're greater than the required 3. So would we be required to list an alternate? Nope, we wouldn't. Okay. Can you? Sure. If at any point you feel like it's necessary, like you're not 100% sold on the forecast, or if you feel like, you know, there's extenuating circumstances that may require an alternate, sure, list one. There's no problem. There's nothing that says that you can't list an alternate. The only thing is that it says you'll always list an alternate unless, you know, if it meets this criteria, you don't have to list one. But feel free to, you know. Safer is better, right? So that's one I need you guys to commit to memory. An alternate's always required unless 1, 2, 3. Okay. Any questions on it? Does everybody have it written down? Okay. Perfect. All right. Why don't we take a break here? Let's do 10 minutes. So we'll jump back on at 10 past the hour. So see you guys then. All right, we got everybody back.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yep, I'm here.
So, Thomas, I just saw your question. Sorry if I missed it earlier, but for takeoff alternate, you asked if vertical visibility is being considered. And yeah, just as the same as if you were doing an approach, whatever the ceiling is being reported at. And vertical visibility, when we're talking about vertical visibility, that's a ceiling report typically, right? So if it's less, let's say you're shooting a standard ILS of 200 feet and half-mile visibility, then if your vertical visibility is only 100 feet, then you'd be required to list an alternate. So I hope that answers the question. Anyways, let's see. Yeah, and if that's the case, and let's say you're flying, and you don't see takeoff alternate listed, then advise your dispatcher, because that is a common one missed for ASAPs. That's the only ASAP I ever had to file was because I missed a takeoff alternate, and that was due because the main reason why I didn't catch it was because vertical visibility, or I'm sorry, the ceiling was at 300 feet, or no, 200 feet. I was shooting, it was a standard ILS available at the airport. So technically I was legal, but then I didn't catch that I had a Hyman's captain. And so that increases his ceiling to 300 feet. So at that point, it required a takeoff alternate. So if you see it, then it's kind of on you as well as a pilot to notify the dispatcher. So yeah, and there's times that you see that, but it's still due to if you see it on the release being reported as VV001, because it's on the release, it still requires, for legalities, it still requires a takeoff alternate, if that makes sense. So, and it didn't, the V, yeah. So, and if a new METAR is released prior to the aircraft taking off, then that also requires an amended release with the newest METAR available. If you haven't pushed back from the gate, once you're past the point of dispatch, then I believe you're okay. But if you're not past the point of dispatch, which I believe is when you release the brakes, then it would require an amended release with an updated METAR on it. So there you go. And for everybody that's listening to this is the deeper, once you get on to an airline, that's kind of what we're talking about here. This is the stuff you'll learn. So anyways, so yeah, technically that's one of those situations that would require a takeoff alternate to be listed. at least from my, from the information you've given me. So, anyways, that way in the future, if you see it, you can, and honestly, the dispatchers can be like, "Oh, thank you very much." It's not like they're going to be like, "Now hold the phone. Who's the dispatcher here?" Try to, pull rank on you or whatever. They're going to be very, very happy you pointed that out. So, yeah, more fuel for us. Exactly. That's another way you can get more fuel on board, right? So, actually, the takeoff alternate doesn't add fuel to your aircraft. So, let's see. So we've kind of beat up alternates there. So for flag operations, it's more strict of requirements. Your ceilings go up to 1,500 feet above the lowest circling MDA, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, it just kind of tweaks it a little bit, makes it a little more restrictive because you're flying longer distances typically, and you're over water, so you better be getting in, right? ETOPS. All right, alternate airport weather minima. No person may list an airport as an alternate in the dispatch or flight release unless the appropriate weather reports or forecasts or any combination thereof indicate that the weather conditions will be at or above the alternate weather minima specified in the certificate holder's operation specifications for that airport when the flight arrives. Okay, so what this boils down to is that when we're planning alternate airports, the alternate airports we add certain restrictions to. So this is based on your airline's operation specifications. And when we get into navigation, we're going to kind of drill this one. We use at SkyWest, we use what's called the 1 nav aid, 2 nav aid rule. And I believe that's pretty universal, but basically, depending on how many navigational aids are at that airport will determine how much we add to the visibility and ceiling of the instrument approach procedure, like what the requirements are. So we'll get a little more into that. Don't get too confused right now. It's not one that you have to have memorized either. Just know that it has to meet alternate requirements. Continuing flight in unsafe conditions. So no pilot in command may allow a flight to continue toward any airport to which it has been dispatched or released if, in the opinion, the pilot in command or dispatcher, the flight cannot be completed safely unless, in the opinion of the pilot in command, there is no safer procedure. In that event, the continuation towards that airport is an emergency situation as set forth in 121.57 or 557. Okay. If any instrument or item equipment required under this chapter for the particular operation becomes inoperative en route, the pilot in command shall comply with the approved procedures for such an occurrence as specified in the certificate holder's manual. So, believe it or not, if it's not safe to continue to the airport, the pilot can't continue to the airport unless it's an emergency. And it's the best possible situation for them. Yeah. And then if something becomes inoperative en route, like I had an airplane where, oh man, what happened? it was like an anti-ice system or weather radar. I can't remember what broke. I believe it was an anti-ice system that broke on this airplane. Like, I had to divert him because his destination had weather over the airport. So to be safe, I had to make him descend down to, a safer altitude. And then I had to get him into the nearest suitable alternate. Because it's not good to have anti-ice equipment fail on your aircraft when you're in flight. That's really bad typically. So, inoperable instruments and equipment. No person may take off an airplane with inoperable instruments or equipment installed unless the following conditions are met. And that condition for us is that an approved MEL or minimum equipment list exists for that airplane. Okay, so that's what we fall under. And what the MEL or minimum equipment list is a list that's put together by the airline in reference to the limitations specified by the aircraft manufacturer. They'll go in and they'll look at what the aircraft manufacturer recommends, and then they'll make tweaks, depending on what our particular aircraft is equipped with. They'll make tweaks to that to where, is this acceptable? Is it not? Do we need to do this? Rather than the recommended procedure. And then we submit that document, just like our op specs, to the FAA, and the FAA authorizes it and sends it back. Okay. Let's see. Operation and icing conditions. This is another pretty important one. No person may dispatch or release an aircraft, continue to operate an aircraft en route, or land an aircraft when in the opinion of the pilot in command or aircraft dispatcher, icing conditions are expected or met that might adversely affect the safety of the flight. Okay. Ice and airplanes don't mix because it changes the air, and we're going to talk about this more, but it changes the aerodynamic efficiency of the aircraft. And it's dramatic as like 60 or 70% loss of efficiency by your wings, something like that. But basically your airplane doesn't, like, the wings just turn into bricks of ice and they don't really create lift like they're supposed to. So operating in icing conditions can be extremely dangerous unless you have anti-ice equipment on board your aircraft, right? Or de-ice equipment. So no person may take off an aircraft when frost, ice, or snow is adhering to the wings, control surfaces, propellers, engine inlets, or other critical surfaces of the aircraft, or when takeoff would not be in compliance with paragraph C of this section. Takeoffs with frost under the wing in the area of the fuel tanks may be authorized by the administrator. So, oh, you're okay, Coffee. So what'll happen is, like, let's say that there's icing conditions at the airport. Have you guys ever been in an airplane that's been de-iced? Or know what it is? Anyone?
No, bet.
All right. So this is what it looks like. Basically, you get a guy in a boom truck. It's like antifreeze, right? And what he does is he sprays down the aircraft with this antifreeze, which melts all the ice off the surface of all the critical surfaces. And then it has that glycol, the de-icing fluid, has what's called a holdover time, which is the amount of time that substance is able to keep ice off without freezing. Does that make sense? So the holdover time is what we kind of go by. And what happens is when we're in these icing situations, you'll see like Thomas, the airplane will be de-iced, and it's been kind of a longer time for them. They've been waiting in line to take off. And you'll see Thomas come out of the cockpit, walk back, and look on both wings. Like he'll kind of look out at the wings, and he'll verify there isn't any frost or ice or snow buildup on the wings before takeoff. So when they're getting close to takeoff, that's, the FO usually goes out and checks the wings for any frost or ice buildup that's occurred while they've been taxiing. And if there's none, if it's not a problem, then you take off. But if there is frost or snow adhering to the wings, you get to go sit back in the de-ice line, and it sucks really bad. Because then you're sitting there taxiing back and forth. But, yeah. And that's probably one of the first or worst things about flying in wintertime, huh, Thomas? Long wait times to get de-iced, and then usually a lot of traffic delays, as long as I'm getting paid. That's true, right? I don't know. I hear a lot of pilots complain about that when I'm up in the cockpit, like, yeah, well, you're not sitting in Minneapolis in, a line of 30 planes waiting to get de-iced, I get all pissy about it. So but in the last paragraph, no person may dispatch, release, or take off an aircraft anytime conditions are such that frost ice. Oh, we already went over that. So we have to have an approved ground de-icing, anti-icing program. And I hope we have enough fuel to burn while we're waiting. Exactly, right? The approved ground de-icing, anti-icing program must include at least the following items. You got to have a list of all the different procedures, whether you use a type 1, type 2, type 3 fluid, what the application process is, the holdover times, all that fun stuff. All right, so certificate holder may specify any regular, provisional, or refueling airport authorized for the type of aircraft as a destination for the purpose of original dispatch or release. But no person may allow a flight to continue to an airport to which it has been dispatched or released, unless the weather conditions at an alternate airport that was specified on the dispatch or flight release are forecast to be at or above alternate minimums. Okay. So this is talking mostly about redispatch or an amendment. Which typically we don't like to do, like I was saying before. We usually just go straight original releases or amended releases, and we don't typically change our destination unless it is for the purpose of diverting the aircraft for safety issues. So takeoffs from unlisted or and alternate airports. So unlisted airports in our operation specifications, like I said yesterday, we have to have a list of all airports that we can dispatch to and from, or take off to and from, take off or land at, I guess I should say. And if we land at an airport that is not listed in our operation specifications, so no pilot may take off an airplane from an airport that is not listed in the op specs unless the airport is and related facilities are adequate for the operation of the airplane. He can comply with the applicable airplane operating limitations. The airplane has been dispatched according to the dispatch rules applicable to the operation from an approved airport, and the weather conditions at the airport are equal to or better than the following. And it gives us the criteria for those airports. Okay. So at SkyWest, we called these our C-70 airports. And that's because they're in Section C, Part 70 or whatever of the airline's operation specifications. But it lists all our airports, and if at all possible, 100%, if you have to divert an aircraft, you want them going to one of the airports on our approved list. If not, it causes a lot of problems, like a ton, and it is a huge headache to get them out of those airports. It usually requires a whole lot of work and a lot of angry people doing that work. So try to get them to land at an airport that is on that list. I understand there's emergencies and sometimes we just got to get them down. But if there's a choice, that's the way you want to do it. Okay, fuel supply. This is one that needs to be verbatim. Okay, you need to memorize this one verbatim. No person may dispatch or take off an airplane unless it has enough fuel, A, to fly to the airport to which it is dispatched. Thereafter, to fly and land at the most distant alternate airport so you can leave this part off. It's redundant. Thereafter, to fly 45 minutes at normal cruising fuel consumption. Okay. So you need to have that part of paragraph C, A, and B right there. So write this down because it is going to be on a test. It's going to be important that you guys have this memorized. Okay. And I'm going to teach you guys an acronym once you get it all written down. Has everybody got it all written down?
Just a second.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm done.
All right. So the acronym to help you memorize this one, and it's more just to recall what you need to include, is BAR. B-A-R. Okay. So BAR stands for burn. Okay. What we consider burn is the fuel to fly to the airport to which it is dispatched. So BAR is burn, or I'm sorry, B is burn. A is to our alternate, or our alternate fuel is the way we'll see it on the release. Okay. And then the R is our reserve fuel. Okay. Every flight requires an additional 45 minutes of fuel on board the aircraft. Everybody got that?
Yep.
One more time.
So B stands for burn, and that's your fuel to fly to the airport, which it's dispatched. The A is for alternate, and that is to fly and land at the most distant alternate, right? And then the R is for your reserve. So to fly an additional 45 minutes at normal cruising fuel consumption.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Now, that being said, you can write to the side, you can write that BAR equals Minto, M-I-N-T-O. Okay. And what Minto is the acronym for is minimum takeoff fuel. Okay. So what Minto is, this BAR acronym that you learned, what Minto is when the pilot lines up on the runway and is about to take off, one of the last checks that they do as they're taking the runway is they ensure that they have the minimum fuel supply, which is this BAR, the burn, alternate, and reserve on board. Okay. Let's say that our burn, alternate, and reserve, we're flying from St. George to Salt Lake. Let's say that the required fuel is 5,200 pounds. Okay, so that's our burn, alternate, and reserve fuel. So it's 5,200 pounds. If the pilot rolls onto the runway and lines up to take off, and the minimum fuel supply is reading 5,190 pounds, he is not allowed to take off. Okay.
So in this case, he have to come back to the bay and refuel again?
Yep. He'll have to taxi back to the ramp and get fueled up again.
And then I believe a new flight plan or something going to be
Nope.
created?
No, unless he's there in the let's say that a new METAR comes out or something, then we just have to amend the release and add the additional stuff that happened while he was taking his time getting refueled again. But but really, like, it doesn't require anything additional. It's just typically the airline's not very happy when the pilot has to taxi back and top off his tanks. So, and it's not necessarily the pilot's fault either. You know, sometimes, you know, you have unexpected delays that happen, and it takes them a little longer to taxi out.
I'll tell you what, your fueler's not going to be very happy.
Yeah. Well, typically the fueler's probably going to go, well, he can wait. I've got 4 other planes that I'm fueling right now. So,
Yep, that one's already late. Let's get the ones that can still be on time.
yep. So that's the way it that's the way the cookie crumbles there. But when they line up, that's okay. Okay. Yeah, that's the way the Minto fuel works. Now remember that this is BAR for the acronym, but BAR is what comprises your minimum takeoff fuel. Now, Thomas asked, how's the examiner going to ask this FAR question during the oral? Are we able to reference back to the FAR during the test if needed? So you cannot, it's not an open book with the tests. It's not open book. But if an examiner, the way an examiner or the way you're going to see it on a test is it's going to ask, what is the required fuel supply for a domestic flight? And you're going to respond, enough fuel to fly to the destination, or to the destination, or to fly to the airport to which it is dispatched. Thereafter to fly and land at the most distant alternate, and thereafter to fly for an additional 45 minutes at normal cruising fuel consumption. So that's the way you would respond to that question. Now, if you were to say like BAR, they're going to be like, okay, what is BAR? Like, I need more info, right? So you're going to have to come up with this, but yeah. This is how you want it memorized. Is that good? Everybody understand?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. I have a question here, please. Can we answer in our way, or it has to be exactly as the paragraph?
I would try to be as close to the paragraph as possible. Like, if you miss a word or two here, as long as it's not an absolutely essential word, they're not going to hold it against you. But try to memorize it word for word. Okay. And the reason why is because the way you interpret it and the way you say it may kind of miss the mark for the examiner, right? They may go, well, that's not really what it's trying to say. They may think that your interpretation of it is a little incorrect. So if you use the verbiage from the FAR, it dispels any of that question in their head. Like, they want to make sure you actually comprehend what you're regurgitating to them. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, clear.
So everybody good there?
Yep.
All right. We're going to jump to that. Once again, these next two FARs just kind of reiterate it and change it according to ETOPS and stuff like that. What we're trying to learn is 121, like rules for domestic operations. And then we expound that knowledge, right? Okay. Here's the next part of factors, or for talking about fuel supply. So the first question an examiner is going to ask you is, what is the required fuel supply for domestic flight? And then typically the follow-up question, and the question that you're going to see on our tests, and you're probably going to get from the examiner, is what are the 4 factors for computing fuel? And Thomas, you may not like this one, but the way I memorize this one is the acronym WAH. And the reason why WAH, like a baby crying, is so applicable to this is because every pilot, that's what they're going to talk to you about, is they're going to cry about their fuel. So WAH, because they're crying about the factors for computing fuel. So the W is WAAA, okay? So the W is wind and other weather conditions forecast. And you do want to memorize this one verbatim as well. Wind and other weather conditions forecast, okay? The first A is anticipated traffic delays. And I changed this one to AN, as in an rather than one, an instrument approach and possible missed approach at the destination. Okay. And then any other conditions that may delay the landing of the aircraft. All right. So WAH. Everybody jot that one down. Yeah, so Minto fuel, so required fuel supply, and you got to listen to the way the question's asked. What is the required fuel supply for a domestic flight? And then the follow-up question is, what are the 4 factors? So using the keyword factors for computing fuel. Okay. So this is different. This is how we come up with like our burn, what we're going to choose for our alternate, any contingency fuel or any hold fuel that we add. So yeah, contingency, hold fuel. I mean, we're even computing wind and other weather conditions forecast in our burn, right? Anticipated traffic delays, that's going to be more of your hold fuel. An instrument approach, missed approach, that's going to be like your, well, at the destination, so your destination fuel. Part of your burn, that's all calculated with your burn. And then any other conditions that may delay the landing of an aircraft, that's going to be your contingency fuel. So like if there was something to come up en route where you may need to deviate around some weather or descend below some turbulence or above some turbulence, that's contingency fuel. So this is how we calculate the burn alternate and reserve fuels. But memorize it this way. And remember factors for computing. Okay. And then memorize that part word for word. Does everybody have it written down?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
Where are we at? Okay. You guys ready for a dinner break? Yeah, and to a point, the software does a lot of it, but we still take in these considerations when we're computing our. Like, I'm the one that determines hold fuel and contingency fuel as a dispatch. That's something. That's something that I add in. Does that make sense? So, yeah, the software does the burn alternate reserve. We do the hold fuel and contingency fuel. We also determine whether or not we're going to use an alternate. So, anyways, why don't we take a dinner break? You guys need 20 minutes. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, good, good.
I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of a cushion. Let's just say 15 after the hour.
15 is good.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Everybody back?
Here.
Yep.
Yes.
Is everybody understanding everything that we're going over, or any questions about anything that we're covering so far?
That's low visibility right now, but I'm sure it'll improve.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, you're reading the dictionary right now, without a whole lot of like background. Once we get this out of the way and start actually learning like theory and stuff like that, it'll make perfect sense what we're talking about. So no worries. So we're going to kind of skip over this VFR stuff. Day operation, 1,000 foot ceiling, 1 mile visibility, night. Just if you're using 121, the chances of you in the contiguous 48 using VFR are slim to none. The only situation where you'd ever run into a VFR flight would be if like the weather radar. Well, even then, no, I really can't think of a situation where you'd use VFR in the contiguous 48. So takeoff and landing weather minimums. What this section kind of boils down to is that we've got to use the approved charts, right? So notwithstanding any clearance from ATC, no pilot may begin or take off an airplane under IFR when the weather conditions reported by the U.S. National Weather Service, a source approved by that service, or a source approved by the administrator, are less than those specified in the certificate holder's op specs or parts 91 and 97 of this chapter, except provided in paragraph D, blah, 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 blah. So what it's talking about here is it's saying that in our Jeppesen charts that we use, we are allowed to, the only time that a pilot can initiate his approach, wait, hold on, let me double check the verbiage here. Okay, no pilot may continue an approach past the final approach fix or where a final approach fix is not used, begin the final approach segment of an instrument approach procedure unless he's at or above the minimums for that approach. So what that's talking about is, let's use Salt Lake City. Let's use Salt Lake City. Okay. Each runway has a different type of approach that we use. Okay. So ILS, when we get to navigation, we'll really dissect these, but ILS approaches are typically our best approaches available. Not typically, they do offer us the lowest minimums for an approach. So when we're looking at this chart, we're looking at most specifically, we're looking at this section here, okay? So for a straight in ILS, the ceiling requirement is 200 feet for runway 16 left, okay? 200 foot ceiling. Remember, that's broken, overcast, or vertical visibility that's being reported. Okay. And you have to have at least, if you have full ILS, then you'd have to have at least a half-mile visibility. So 200-foot ceiling, half-mile visibility. And that's the standard. That's, pretty much the lowest you can go. Unless you have certain exemptions in your op specs. But for the purposes of this class, that is the lowest minimums that you can get. Okay, 200 and a half. And this is a standard straight in ILS. So what it's saying in this FAR is that no pilot may continue or begin the final approach segment of the instrument approach procedure unless he has reporting the 200-foot ceiling and half-mile visibility. If ATC tells him that he doesn't have 200-foot ceilings or half-mile visibility, he can't even start the final approach into the runway. So the final approach fix is where they start their final descent onto the runway. So you kind of step down from altitude to altitude as you get in closer to the airport. But the final approach fix is where he starts that final descent into the runway. Okay. And we'll talk a lot about this, but he can't go past this point unless he's getting the report is above these minimums. Okay. Does that make sense? Kind of, very high level. I hope so. Like I said, if it doesn't, we're going to really beat the snot out of that when we get to navigation. So don't get too antsy or frustrated with it right now. Okay. So talking about landing minimums still, if the pilot in command of an airplane has not served for 100 hours as pilot in command, and this is something that you guys need to memorize. You don't need to memorize the verbiage, just need to memorize that this is talking about what we call high minimums captains, okay? High mins captains. And we kind of touched on this yesterday, a little bit today. So a high mins captain means that he has not been the pilot in command of an airplane, a new type, like a type of airplane, for 100 hours or greater. So he's still under this 100-hour mark. So he just got certified as the captain, and he's the first 100 hours, he has to have higher minimums to ensure that, he's got a little bit of a cushion in case he makes a mistake or whatever. Okay. So what we do is we add 100, we have to increase the minimums for the airport and for the approach we're shooting by 100 feet and 1/2 mile. So we would add 100 feet to the ceiling, making it 300 feet, and 1/2 mile to the visibility, making it 1 mile, would be our landing minimums for a straight in ILS on 16 left. So what I want you to memorize is that a high mins captain, we have to add 100 feet to his ceilings and 1/2 mile to his visibility. So everybody write that down. Everybody got it?
Can you repeat it one more time, please?
So when we have a high mins captain, meaning a captain that has not served for 100 hours in that, for more than 100 hours in that type of aircraft, we have to increase his minimums by 100 feet and 1/2 mile. So we have to add 100 feet to the ceiling and 1/2 mile to the visibility.
Thank you.
Yep. So in this case, that means that he will never be able to use or to go below 301 mile. Like standard ILS, straight in ILS is 200.5. And so when we add that 101.5 to his minimums, he will never be able to shoot an approach if the weather's below 301. He would have to divert at that point and go to his alternate. Okay. That's what I want you guys to have memorized. 100.5. High mins 100.5. Okay. Applicability of reported weather minimums. So in conducting operations under 121.649 through blah, 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 the ceiling and visibility values in the main body of the latest weather report control for VFR and IFR takeoffs and landings and for instrument approach procedures on all runways of an airport. However, if the latest weather report, including an oral report from the control tower, contains a visibility value specified as runway visibility or runway visual range for a particular runway of an airport, that specified value controls for VFR and IFR landings and takeoffs and straight in instrument approaches for that runway. So let's break this down into non-FAA bullcrap jargon. Let's take all the fluff out. What it's saying is that if an RVR value is being reported, that is the controlling value. So let's see. Oh, we gotta go to METARs. Let me pull up some METARs here. There we got some poor visibility here. So K-Swift. METARs. Ding, ding, ding. KSF. That's 3 hours. See if there's any METARs that are RVR. No. Let's see. JFK's getting low. LaGuardia's getting low. Okay. Yay, I found some. All right. So this is what an RVR report looks like. And once again, we'll get into this later in the class. We're talking about meteorology report, like weather reports, and we'll use it pretty extensively throughout the rest of the class. But as for right now, just to kind of give you guys a taste, right now for runway 4 right, the RVR value is 5,500 feet, varying to greater than 6,000 feet. Okay. So let's just say this RVR value comes in at 2,000 feet. Okay, so 2,000 feet is a lot less than 4 miles of visibility. Okay, so that RVR value would be controlling over this 4 miles of visibility. Okay, we have to use the lowest value. Well, let me take that back. We have to use the RVR value if it's being reported. Doesn't matter if it's lower or higher than the reported visibility here, the RVR value is controlling. Okay, so this can hurt us. Most of the time it hurts us, or it can help us. Okay, so even right here, our visibility is dropping to 5,500 feet. Okay, 5,500 feet is approximately 1 mile, but we've got 4 miles of visibility being reported. Let's say this is 1/4 mile and not one quarter statute mile, and we're getting a RVR value of 5,500 feet, 1 mile of visibility. Guess what? Good, you know, the sun shine is in our favor, and we can use the RVR value of 1 mile. So we'd still be able to initiate a final approach. Like the pilot, if he got an RVR value at 5,500 feet and the visibility requirement is a 1/2 mile, he'd be able to initiate his, or he'd be able to do start his final approach into the runway. Okay. So, like I said, we'll get into this a little more in depth, but that's what this FAR is talking about. That RVR value is controlling. And I'd write that down. RVR is always controlling. So flight altitude rules. It's just talking about some of our minimums. Really, we don't need to worry too much about that. Responsibility for dispatch release. Okay. Each certificate holder conducting domestic or flag operations shall prepare a dispatch release for each flight between specified points based on information furnished by an authorized aircraft dispatcher. Hey, that's our job, right? So we're the ones that create the dispatch release. The pilot in command and authorized aircraft dispatcher shall sign the release only if they both believe that the flight can be made with safety. The aircraft dispatcher may delegate the authority to sign the release for a particular flight, but he may not delegate his authority to dispatch. Okay, so what it's talking about here is a dispatcher. Let's say that dispatcher is working in an office far, far off site, right? And he sends an electronic copy of the dispatch release to the pilot. That is his signature, okay? So that's his signature signing the release. So by all means, by the definition of it, we just delegated our authority to sign the release because we never physically signed the release, right? But we may not delegate our authority to dispatch, which means that we cannot how do I word this? We cannot like have our buddy sitting next to us and say, hey, dispatch this flight for me. And he fills out all the information and then sends it, right? If he doesn't have a dispatch license and we just delegated our authority to dispatch, that's violation of an FAR. Like, even though we're an authorized dispatcher and we may be sitting there and watching him, he cannot dispatch a flight unless Like he just can't do it. We can't delegate that authority. So this will be on the test. It's a true or false, and it'll say something like the dispatcher can delegate his authority to dispatch, true or false, something to that effect. And that would be a false, right? Because we cannot delegate our authority to dispatch. We can delegate the authority to sign, can't delegate the authority to dispatch. Another way of looking at this too, thinking about it, is let's say that we get into a situation where we're at work and we're dispatching and we come across a flight that we are not comfortable dispatching. Like the weather's bad and we just, like, everything tells us that it's probably legal to go, but at the same time, you know, we may have a question about legalities, and everybody's just like, just send it. Like, you as a dispatcher, no, like, do not, if you are not comfortable dispatching a flight that you are responsible for, then don't send it. Don't dispatch it until you have the answers to the questions you have on the release. But the way that this FAR is coming into play in this situation is, let's say that somebody's like, you know what, if you're not going to send that release, I'll send it. Like, no, that's a violation of a FAR because that release is in my control. So if I say that flight's not legal and I'm not sending it, like, they can't just pull that flight from you and say, well, then somebody else will send it. You know, find somebody that's willing to send that release and send it. So you have operational control, right? So subpart B talks about crew member and records, crew member and dispatch records. So we got to maintain records, including all of our examination, training, qualifications. The air carrier is going to maintain those records. And they have to record each action concerning the release from employment or physical or professional disqualification of any flight, crew member, or aircraft dispatcher, and keep record for at least 6 months thereafter. Okay, so they've got to maintain that record for 6 months. Aircraft record, flag operations, kind of the same thing. All right, yay! Here's another acronym that I can teach you guys, and this one's my favorite because it allows me to cuss without getting in trouble. So the acronym for this one is DAMNIT, D-A-M-N-I-T. So the dispatch release may be in any form, but must contain at least the following information. So if you get asked what must be on the dispatch release, you, in your head, don't ever say this in an interview or on a test, in your head go, damn it, and you will instantly remember what has to be on the dispatch release, okay? The first one is your departure airport, intermediate stops, destination airports, and alternate airports. Basically, any airport you're going to land at. I recommend that you memorize this verbatim, but on this one, you can use like any airport that you land at. But departure airport, intermediate stops, destination, and alternate airports. The A is a type of flight. or a type of operation. So is it IFR, VFR, supplemental, whatever it is, okay? The M is our minimum fuel supply. The I is identification number of the aircraft. And the T is the trip number. Okay, so D, departure airport, intermediate stops, destination airports, and alternate airports. A is a type of operation, a type of flight. Is it IFR or VFR? Make sure that if you're going to say like a type of flight, that you specify is it IFR or VFR. Like as an example. Then minimum fuel supply for the M, ID number of the aircraft, and then the trip number. Okay. Those are your 5 required items on a dispatch release. Good? You need time to write it down?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, so the dispatch release must contain or have attached to it weather reports, available weather forecasts, or a combination thereof for the destination airport, intermediate stops, and alternate airports that are the latest available at the time the release is signed by the pilot in command and dispatcher. Okay, it's got to have the most recent weather attached. Okay, so DAMIT is the 5 required items, and it's just important to note somewhere in the back of your head, it's not part of the 5 required items, but the weather is attached to the release. Okay. May include any additional information as far as whether if the dispatcher or pilot deem it necessary. Everybody good with dispatch release? Okay, I'm gonna, give me 1 second. I'm gonna try to pull up the dispatch release. One more second. I kind of want you guys to see what and if I can't pull it up right now, you guys will definitely see dispatch releases, but I'm trying, guys. Maybe a lost cause for tonight. Let me see. All right. So this is the best I can do for now. We'll get an actual dispatch release pulled up here in class. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is for a different airline, but it gives you like the aircraft tail number, type of aircraft, dispatcher name, captain, first officer, flight attendants. And it gives you the fuel, your burn alternate reserve, right? There's your minimum fuel. So, anyways, this is kind of what it looks like. We'll get an actual one and show you guys. But yeah. Okay. Here's another one that you guys need to learn. And I got another acronym for you. So the acronym for this one is DLC, like downloadable content, kind of. So DLC. So a pilot in command of an airplane shall carry in the airplane to its destination. The D is the dispatch release. Okay. The L is the load manifest, and the C is a copy of the flight plan. So you got to have the dispatch release, load manifest, and a copy of the flight plan. Everybody got it?
Well, the D for dispatch release and the C for a copy of the flight plan, and the L is where it's mentioned.
Load manifest.
Load manifest. Okay, I got it.
Yep. Perfect. Any questions on that? All right. So the air carrier or the certificate holder shall keep copies of the dispatch release for at least 3 months. Okay. Supplemental, it's a little bit different, but communications. So each certificate holder conducting domestic or flag operations shall record en route radio contact between the certificate holder and its pilots and shall keep record for at least 30 days. Okay. So any contact we have between the pilots and the dispatchers, we have to keep on file for 30 days. Comprende?
Yeah, good.
Okay. There you go. You guys, you're through the meat and potatoes of the FARs.
Now, we're supposed to have access to all that through Google Drive, correct?
Yep.
I don't see any of it in there.
Okay. Just give me 1 second. Let's see what's the 16th. Let me.
Flashcards are all I see in there.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this pulled over for you guys to be able to review. All right, so you've got this part. Do you see this part? The folders, advisory circulars, course manuals, flight planning, legal to go, worksheets.
Nope. None of that.
All right. So let me do this. View members. Let me see if I can add you. All right. I'm gonna have to let Adam know because he hasn't given me the authority to add anybody to the Google Drives for some reason.
Okay.
So, I'll text Adam right now, actually. Have you gone to the shared drives? Like if you click on shared drives on the side here and gone into that right there? Or in my drive?
Oh, that's right. It's not.
Or if you go into shared with me, it might be in there also.
Well, I'm doing it on my phone. I wonder if it'd be better on my desktop. It should be the same though, right?
Sometimes, yeah. I've noticed that like my
okay.
Safari.
That's it. I went in the right. I was going to my drive and not shared drives.
Okay. Yep.
There it
So those can be found if you click into lesson plans, go to week 1 and then the day that we're on. That's where all those files are getting stored. And then if you look at like day 1, here's the recording. There's Thomas right there, just chilling in his Tesla or whatever he's got. Can a supervisor override? No, a supervisor can't actually override your dispatch release. They make you do all that stuff. Anyways, there you go. Yeah. So any questions on FAR 121? So I'm going to go through, let's see.
You could start from the beginning if you wanted to.
You guys really want to go through that again? I can do it. I mean, I do it like at least 4 times a year. So here we go. We're going to do some of J-Dog's cards here, okay? So as a class, and most of these are your 121s. So we'll go through them one at a time. Just make sure you guys got it. So the required amount of instruction needed to obtain an aircraft dispatch license.
200.
Ding. Nice. Okay, what is the exercise of authority over initiating, conducting, or terminating a flight? What is that the definition of?
Operational control.
Ding. So what age must you be to get a dispatch license?
23.
23.
23. So pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch are the responsibilities of who?
The dispatcher.
Dispatcher.
And pilot.
And pilot. Okay. Joint responsibilities for the
Joint
PIC.
responsibilities of the PIC and dispatcher.
Oh, wow. I dig it. Okay. Here, let's see. So what are the dispatcher's sole responsibilities? Does anybody remember the acronym at least? What was that?
Is it Mike?
Yeah, that one's Mike.
Okay, monitoring the progress of each flight, issuing necessary information for the safety of the flight, and canceling or redispatching a flight if, in his opinion or the opinion of the pilot in command, the flight cannot operate or continue to operate safely as planned or released.
Perfect. Wow. That's awesome. All right. Yeah. So what do we add to a high min's captain's landing minimums?
100 foot to the ceiling and half a mile visibility.
What was that?
100 feet to the ceiling and a 1/2 mile to visibility.
Awesome. Thomas got it too. Sweet. So Hyman's captain is a captain with less than 100 hours in that type of aircraft, and we add 100.5. Perfect. Oh, that's one that we're going to get to a little bit later. So icing conditions are when we have visible moisture in 10 degrees Celsius and below. I don't know why that's in the FARs. That should be in weather. Yeah. All right. So Minto or bar, what is the required fuel supply for a domestic flight?
Minimum fuel for takeoff.
To fly to the airport,
Fly to
which
the
it's
airport.
dispatched to,
45
then
minutes of
after
cruise speed.
fly and land at the most additional airport in 45 minutes.
Yeah. So enough to fly to the destination, thereafter to fly to the furthest alternate, and thereafter to fly for 45 minutes of normal cruise fuel consumption. Good. Oops. There we go. Fuel to fly to the airport, which is dispatched. Boom, boom, boom. Also known as bar. Okay, so what are the 4 factors for computing fuel? What's our acronym?
What? When?
Wah.
Good.
When?
So what are our factors?
Wind and other weather conditions forecast, anticipated traffic delays, one instrument approach and possible missed approach at destination, and any other conditions that may delay landing of the aircraft.
Boom. Perfect. Oh, so when do we require a takeoff alternate?
Whenever the landing minimums at the departure airport or below minimums at the departure airport.
Yep. So whenever we're below landing minimums at the departure airport. Remember, we can't get back in, right? So that requires that we go to a different airport. Oh, boom. One addition to this FAR is that's kind of important is the takeoff alternate, the requirement for the takeoff alternate, okay? So the requirement for the takeoff alternate is that the takeoff alternate has to be within 1 hour at normal cruise speed and still air with one engine in off. Okay. So 1 hour of flight time at normal cruise speed in still air with one engine inoperative. Everybody write that down, memorize it. Just like that. Okay. I'll say it as many times as I need to. In fact, it might be the next one. No.
Say it again.
Okay, there we go. So the 3 parameters for our takeoff alternate are one engine inoperable, not more than 1 hour from our departure airport, at normal cruise speed in still air. Good. All right, let's go back to. So when is an alternate required? I'm talking about a destination alternate.
Always.
Always, unless what?
Let's see, 1 hour before or 1 hour after the ETA. It's the 1, 2, 3. The ceiling will be at least 2,000 feet above the airport. Visibility will be at least 3 miles.
Perfect. Yep. So always, unless 1, 2, 3. 1 hour before or after the ETA, 2,000 foot ceilings, and 3 miles of visibility. Yeah. 5 required items on release. What's the acronym? It's my favorite one.
Damn it.
Yeah. Okay.
Departure airport, immediate stops, destination airports, and alternate airports. A statement of the type of operation, IFR, VFR, minimum fuel supply, identification number of the aircraft, and trip number.
Perfect. Nailed it. What constitutes a suitable airport for diversion? I kind of touched on this one, but this is good. Right, I gave you a couple, but proper fuel type for the aircraft, proper handling equipment for the aircraft and passengers, and within the fuel range of the aircraft. Those are 3 good examples. So you guys can jump back onto Quizlet and write that one down if you'd like. Required hours that we get a jump seat. I hate the required hours part of this. Like
5 hours.
5 hours.
it is required, yeah. It's 5 hours, but it's required. But like, I don't feel like it's a requirement. It's a pleasure, right?
I was going to say I'll do 50 if they're cool with it.
For reals. Here, let me show you guys a view. Let's see here.
If you like to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there are people, it is really, really weird when you show up, like the guy that trained me at SkyWest before I got on the dispatch floor. Like the dude never used his flight benefits and absolutely hated jump seating. Like it literally was a chore for him. It was a requirement for him, like to go out and get his hours. And I always told him, I'm like, you are crazy. Like, what are you even doing in this industry? You know, I used to tease him all the time about it, but I don't know. I'm such a big aviation nut. It's just hard for me to comprehend that one.
Well, I don't like to fly, but you put me in
Yeah.
a Cessna in Alaska, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
such a rush, and the scenery's so amazing. I mean, who cares?
Right. Well, and that's a huge difference, you know, when you're in a small plane and you can feel every little bump,
Oh yeah,
and you're going into airports and stuff that, yeah, I mean, that's a whole different level of flying, right? But in these big old school bus airplanes, it's awesome. I love it. So, Let's see here. Pull this up really quick. All right, so this is Thomas's office every day, right? This is what he gets to see. Ooh. These beautiful clouds. Well, every day that he's flying, but this was my flight into Aspen. This approach is pretty fun.
I lived in Aspen.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I used to go sit up there and watch the planes. Yeah, it's
Yeah, they'd
kind of
fly
fun.
like 100 feet over your head, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, Aspen's the one airport in the continental U.S. my company will not go to.
Yeah, it takes a lot of extra training, and like you got to know what you're doing going into there. Let's see. Pretty confident. Like this should be a video. Oh, it's just got to load. I'll show you guys what it's like to take off from Aspen. And like you guys are going to watch this and you're going to be like, what's the big deal with taking off from Aspen? But like, do you guys see these mountains here? And do you understand how quick those mountains come up?
Yeah, you're what?
300 knots on them, 250. You know, it
12, 13,000 foot tall mountains
yeah.
around three sides of you.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much, it's almost a full, like, surrounded by these mountains. So, and for some reason, these videos don't play the cleanest. On when I'm showing them to you guys like this, but let's see. There we go. And really, the terrain is only part of the reason why flying in and out of Aspen is so sketchy. The other part is you get a lot of really weird weather patterns and a lot of wind shear and funky turbulence. Right, low-level wind shear is like the #1 killer at this airport. So you could have the most clear, beautiful day, and like pilots can't land there, and you look at the wind report and it's like gusting to 25 knots, direct crosswind, or like I'm sorry, low level wind shear encountered at like 500 feet above the runway or whatever, and it goes from a 10 knot headwind to like a 20 knot tailwind in the blink of an eye. Like, that's the kind of stuff that they encounter all the time. So that's why it's so dangerous flying in and out of there. The other reason is the missed approach procedure landing in Aspen is pretty sketchy, because you're like in a bowl at Aspen. You're surrounded on, like you said, 3 sides of the airport, and you kind of got to do this funky loop to do the missed approach procedure that is pretty difficult. Oh, and Aspen is a one-way in, one-way out. So if winds are bad in one direction, like, you're not landing. So anyways, yeah, we call them at SkyWest, they're called the SAT-4 airport. And we have a desk dedicated to dispatching SAT-4 airports only. So it takes extra training to do those desks, but the mountain desk was what we called it, and that was my favorite desk to dispatch on. So for a couple different reasons, but Quizlet, let's see, where are we at? Okay. Official language. Oh, what language do we have to be able to read, write, and speak fluently?
English.
English.
Oh, I don't like that one. So dispatch, release, load manifest, and a copy of the flight plan. Like, what's significant? What are we going here for here? These are items that are required.
Pilot has to have in the plane.
Yep. Perfect. How long can we be on duty?
10
10
hours.
hours.
10 hours.
10 hours. Max speed of an aircraft below 10,000 feet.
250.
Yeah, 250. Can you delegate your authority to dispatch?
No.
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 Okay, 5 things that are required to be on an op specs would be things, and we talked about this one yesterday, I believe. So a list of
The
authorized.
Headquarters. Address of headquarters. List all aircraft. List all airports. DBAs and reference to economic authority.
Beautiful. I like it. So, section of the FARs that contains rules for scheduled air carriers. Scheduled being the key word. It's the one we went over tonight.
121.
121.65.
121. 65 is dispatchers. Yeah, dispatcher. That's a dispatch FAR. Yeah, we'll skip that one. Good. You guys did really well. Any questions about the stuff we covered tonight? All right, then. Feel free to stay on a little later, and you can ask questions or whatever.